Check it out, John. Back by popular demand. Check it out, John. Are they crazy? Once again.
Hello and welcome. I'm Lee Peterson. I'm the host of the podcast WDcast, which is called WDcast because it's brought to you by WD Partners, whose tagline is innovation at scale. That's WDpartners.com. Thank you, WD, and thank you, Chris, in particular. Today, we have someone with us who is an expert in the world of growth and optimization for CPG, and for you laymen, that is consumer packaged goods, Gina Peterson. She is the Senior Manager of Retail Experience for Hershey, who has a background that would flatter anyone on earth, and I'll let her tell you about that. But let's put it this way, hold on to your sweet tooth. And Gina, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Lee. How are you? Thanks for having me.
So far, so good. We have a sunny day in Ohio, which is kind of like, we get 7 of these a year. So
enjoy it.
It's a good day, even though it's 21. And how are you? You're Pittsburgh, correct?
Yes. Yeah. In Pittsburgh, same here. We're finally getting some vitamin D, finally getting some sun. We saw the grass for the first time in a while today. So I feel like the seasonal mood shift is happening. It feels good.
I know. I saw a robin. Let's end it with that. Okay, Gina, could you please tell us and the listeners like a little bit about yourself, like start from point A and take us all the way to point Hershey?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of interesting. We have a coined phrase here at Hershey, that's Hershey in your heart. And I feel like I've had Hershey in my heart for a long time. So my family's from Greater Philadelphia, but we actually relocated to Hershey, Pennsylvania when I was about 5 years old. So I had the opportunity to spend the greater part of my childhood growing up in really the sweetest place on earth in Hershey, Pennsylvania. So, and of course, when I was a child, Hershey to me was not, the Hershey company and the large organization we now have the opportunity to work for. It was really the iconic brands that, my parents would have in their candy dish and Hershey Park, which we grew up with season passes. My parents would drop us off curbside and we would spend the day getting in trouble at the park. And it was really fun. So I went to college at Villanova outside of Philadelphia, went kind of to my roots in Philly, and I had no plans to return home, right? So it was a small town. It was a wonderful place to grow up, but I loved the big city. And upon graduation, I stayed in Philly. I spent a couple years in finance. I really had no clue what I wanted to do, like most of us. So I studied marketing and international business just for a good excuse to go abroad a couple times and get that experience under my belt. So I spent a couple years in finance and I really wanted to get into sales. I just kind of took a look ahead and said, hey, in 10, 15 years, is this what I want to be doing? And there was no passion there. I wasn't excited about going to work every day. And so I spent a couple years doing pharmaceutical sales. And obviously that industry was going through a transformational time. And I started talking to some informal mentors of mine and was looking at what's a really good industry to get into in sales? And I wanted to build some passion, and somebody gave me the advice, which was really incredible, was identify brands that you have a passion for, that you're a consumer for, and go see if they have opportunity. And so I started to list, obviously, all the wonderful brands I was passionate about. And here we are 11 years later. So I started working for Hershey. I started in Philadelphia as kind of what we call feet on the street. I was in the stores, peddling the product, finding display opportunities, calling on store managers across mass retailers and food retailers. I've held 7 different roles with Hershey, everything from kind of retail sales, account management sales, spent some time up in Rhode Island. I spent a couple years in Minneapolis, a couple years in Denver, and most recently we landed in Pittsburgh. Hershey's provided a ton of flexibility. We're a dual income family with 2 young kids. So having a little bit of flexibility, my husband relocates and I've relocated as well. And, it's about 3.5 hours west of Hershey. I spend an incredible amount of time in Hershey, but I would tell you overall, obviously I have no plans to leave. This is home for me. 2 probably primary key reasons I stay around and why we have a ton of really tenured individuals here at Hershey. The first one is the people. We hire not just really talented people, but really, really good people. And also just the foundation of who we are as an organization. I know a lot of people know us for iconic brands, the Kiss, the Reese, the Hershey bar, but Milton Hershey, who founded the Hershey Company, was a real pioneer and developed not only the Hershey Company, but the town of Hershey. And a lot of people don't know, but him and his wife Katie were unable to have children of their own. So they actually started a school for orphan boys. It's called the Milton Hershey School. It's obviously still there today. Growing up in Hershey, they were a rival high school of ours, just like any other high school. And the school and the foundation have certainly developed and grown over time, but there's still, it's very all inspiring to know there's a greater purpose behind every candy bar we sell other than just kind of bringing sweet moments of goodness to everybody every day. So that's kind of my journey to Hershey. I've been here for 11 years. I feel incredibly thankful to have this opportunity, and it's been fun.
I have to say, with my experience, I've worked with several CPG brands. At one point in time, I was working with an unnamed brand, let's put it that way. And
Sure.
we were sitting around a table, and I thought, everybody here is so smart. I'm so impressed by everybody kind of in the industry. I said, you guys realize, if you weren't selling this, that you could probably solve like world hunger? And, we got to laugh at it, but it's really true. It's an industry that is like loaded with people like yourself, active and very intelligent. So talk about like what you do, like what's a day in your life right now with the experience tag or moniker hanging over you?
Yeah, I would say, that's a pretty loaded statement. Every day is certainly different. I'm sure for you guys as well. I would say, just to kind of sum it up at the really macro level, our team is dedicated to identifying new opportunities. We're looking for growth and optimization opportunities that we ultimately can partner with our retailers on. And for us, it's really around, we spend a ton of time looking for holistic solutions that go well beyond, again, how to sell another candy bar, which is why we have really strong partnerships with many of our retailers. Our team's dedicated to, we're building playbooks and principles for these macro solutions for our retail partners. And I would say I spend about 50% of my time in what I would say is developing capabilities, uncovering the opportunities. Obviously, right now with the pandemic and the disruptors and accelerators that we're experiencing at retail, there's a lot of time on where is there stickiness, where are we seeing adoption, and how do we need to update our playbooks and principles. And then I spend about the other 50% of my time working to go activate that. Right, nothing happens unless we're adding value to our retail customers. So we support. We're really a home office center of excellence, if you will. So my key customer is our sales team. We're supporting our sales and category management leaders and then meeting with retailers.
And the sales team associates with their key customer is the grocer, let's say, or a Walmart or a Target or somebody like that, right?
Absolutely. Yep. So we have account teams all over the country, anywhere we have a key account, and we are basically putting together solutions that they can go deploy with their retailer. And for us, retail experience has obviously evolved. We spend the majority of our time historically looking at the in-store environment, but that's obviously shifted, and now the environment's really tethered. But everything, we have a team under our team that is dedicated to all things pay point and fulfillment. That's really what led us to partner with WD. So we are looking at what are the emerging technologies? How does the shopper navigate that space? What does the macro space look like of the future? And then also center store, right? We know center store is shifting the purpose of center store. There's categories being purchased online right now. How do we help our retailers create basket building opportunities to get one more item in the basket? So yeah, pre-pandemic, I obviously spent a lot of my time engaged in the in-store experience, but that's evolving. I'm learning just as quickly as everybody else is.
You talk a lot about insight to activation.
Yes.
Like everything I've seen you talk about. Could you talk about that? Like, so you're saying from the customer to the sales floor, basically, right?
Yes. So insights to activation to us is kind of our North Star, right? It's the process we go through to identify and then implement opportunities. So for us, it's really around kind of assess, develop, and activate. Assess is, for us, it's the foundation. It's shopper insights. It's data analytics. It's ideating on 100 ideas that'll ultimately lead to, a couple ideas we incubate, which is creating that solution, ultimately engaging the shopper, driving profitable growth for the retailer, and then activate for us is test to commercialize. So, Hershey really prides itself on being an insights first organization. We actually had a leader in our organization that said, we are an insights company. We just happen to sell confection. I love that. I love to hear that. So for us, the insights to activation is really uncovering that opportunity, talking to the shopper, understanding behavior, and then go test and commercialize to drive profitable solutions.
So there's two things really, right? There's the voice of the customer, and then you're kind of in between that and the voice of the industry, which is your ultimate client, not only the sales team, but your ultimate client. So do you have to sync those up? Are those different a lot? Or have you seen huge disparities at times, like when everybody shifted to online?
So I would say, in my opinion, there's no doubt that they're linked, right? For us at Hershey, as I just mentioned, every solution and recommendation that we deploy is grounded in the voice of the shopper. So to me, we look at them separately. the voice of the shopper is so powerful. Everything happens because the shopper is demanding it or looking for it, right? So all of our principles and playbooks are grounded in the shopper. Of course, the shopper expectation is shifting. So the industry is really driven to build on that shopper. So considering the pandemic, right, the shopper has new demands and new expectations, and that's driving the emergence of whether it's new technology or new store formats or new pressures on operations that are causing us to look for new solutions,
Right.
New experiences. So we use them separate. We also talk about the voice of the industry internally as kind of our platform for thought leadership, if you will. So, if anyone's had the opportunity to attend one of our Voice of the Industries, you'll know it starts with the voice of the shopper. And then to us, the voice of the industry is kind of the change created from the shopper.
So the voice of the shopper, and we know this from the research that we do. For example, a few years ago, they started with buy online, pick up at store, sort of.
Yes.
I want you to come and put it in the trunk. And traditional CPG and the traditional voice of the customer was, I'm going to go to the middle of the store and buy the product. So that must have been a tremendous sea change for you guys, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting too. And you probably know our category is highly unplanned, right? We don't make the shopping list. So when you put together your list and you're going to the food store, oftentimes the fun stuff like candy, mint, and gum, or what we call confection, doesn't make the list, right?
Right.
But when you're in store and you see your favorite brands and we engage you in the right way through display or activation, you purchase it, and you purchase it frequently. So there's a real shift on how do we now engage that shopper in this new digital world. And the environments, again, they're really tethered. We know 2 in 3 food shoppers cross shop between brick and mortar and online. We know 1 in 3 in-store purchases actually starts online. 1 in 4 online purchases actually starts in store. So we're really seeing these digitally enabled stores now. And
Right.
from our perspective, what's most important and what we have really uncovered is that there's not a lift and shift. The in-store playbook that's been around for so long and has been incredibly powerful doesn't work on the online environment, right? And so it really cements the importance of integrating this retail, search, and social, because the shopper's path to purchase has evolved. But for us, it's really the consideration of that unplanned element. How do we get on the shopper shopping list? How do you become a part of the search?
I heard a CEO on a podcast just recently talking about, well, everybody knows now that retail is digital first.
Yeah.
And so that has to really affect what you do as well.
Yes, absolutely. So, for example, too, just within our categories, we think about this digital first. There's categories that shoppers are going in store specifically for. So, for example, we know about 59% of shoppers who do click and collect, they still go into the store after picking up their groceries and create what we call a second basket. But they're two separate occasions, right? And so it's really challenged us to say, okay, how do we look at assortment and offerings and experiences that the shopper historically could curate online? How do we bring that into the physical world? So it's not just replicating the in-store playbook in the digital world, but really vice versa as well. And we think about a really great example is the checkout experience. So in store, historically, it was a bit of a pain point for the shopper, right? You've concluded your shopping list, you navigate to the front of the store. Your number one priority is to get through as quickly as possible. So retailers said, hey, let's occupy their time and put highly impulsive merchandise in this space. We know we'll get one more item in the basket and we'll engage the shopper. And for our category, that was impulse, which was you find your favorite Reese 2 cup, you purchase it, and you actually eat it before you even leave the parking lot. Instant consumable. Shopping is tough. Yeah. I mean, we all do it, right? You want to reward yourself. You want to buy an item for your child who's been really, really good in the store and you want to reward them. Now, as we think about it online, you're not going through the same behavior. Your checkout isn't 4 minutes in line. You're not looking for merchandise. You're going through and looking at your list and making sure you purchased everything. And so it's shifting from impulse of instant consumables to total unplanned. And so, there's a shift even within the category as it seasons, as it take home packs. So yeah, I mean, this digital first, I think there's, again, if you look at the shopper behavior, there's no doubt about it. There's definitely, they want this seamless experience across physical and digital. So
does that make you think about DTC, direct to consumer?
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of brands that are starting to look at direct to consumer. For us, it's always an interesting one, especially because of the melt factor, I would call it. thinking about profitability of how do we get that product to the consumer in a profitable manner.
You have to almost be like the vaccine, right? You have to ship it frozen.
Exactly. Even if you order product in the summer from Amazon, that's confection product, typically it comes with, an ice pack that's in it. So there's a lot of operational elements for consideration as our category thinks about direct to consumer.
Yeah, it's huge. And considering all the operational considerations, I mean, it's huge. I mean, I remember working with a large beverage company at one point in time, and I'm like, why don't you guys open your own store? Because they had just about everything. Yeah. And they're like, well, let's see. There's the employees, there's logistics, there's the POS, like on and on and on.
Oh, yeah.
And it's daunting to
yes.
a degree. Now, online and e-commerce has shifted that a little bit, but there's still a lot of things that retailers are doing for centuries, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things that I noticed about COVID-19 was that it was an accelerator for almost everything. Like buy online, pick up in store was already happening, and then it tripled. The footfalls in stores were falling, and then they really fell for a lot of different reasons. But the real disruptor was work from home. So how are you guys dealing with work from home, other than DTC? But as a company, how's that going for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I guess first I'll kind of address that from the personal perspective of how Hershey and myself have transitioned, and then talk a little bit about the impact of the business. But really interesting. It's a really interesting thought on kind of the disruptor versus accelerator. I would say if I had $1 for every time I said those two words over the last year, I'd be a pretty rich woman. But there's no doubt that there's a massive retail revolution underway. And I also personally believe a lot of it is driven by the shift in at-home behavior, whether you're working from home, schooling from home. It's really driven trips to different channels that didn't experience those trips before. And of course, taking trips away from some channels like convenience and fuel, now that shoppers aren't going, driving as much to school and work, and they don't need to fuel up and grab those items. I personally also believe, the disruptor of work from home is accelerating a lot of accelerators. So for example, 3 out of 4 people tried a new shopping method during the pandemic. Is the reason because of their at-home behavior. So as we consider kind of where there'll be maintained adoption and stickiness, I think we all anticipate this work from home is shifting, and we've really tried to meet our shopper and our consumer in these new occasions. So one thing we quickly uncovered as soon as the pandemic started, our shopper insights team was talking to shoppers on a day-to-day basis, was there's more family time at home, and there's more gaming and screen time and family movie night. And with all of that has an increasing the snacking occasion. So it was really productive for us and for our brands and the snacking occasion overall as shoppers were shifting to this at-home behavior. And a lot of really large corporations, I think we've all seen it in the news, have kind of put a stake in the ground to say, we're willing to support this work from home behavior for as, into the foreseeable future. And I think it's going to be almost kind of, table stakes for recruiting great talent going forward. People want flexibility. And I don't really blame them. I think a lot of people, myself included, have found a lot of productivity in the work from home. So pre-pandemic, my husband and I both were traveling almost every single week. And I had the opportunity to meet with a retailer, probably maybe one retailer a week, maybe 2, because it was you travel to that destination for the purpose of a 1-hour meeting. And the expectation was you were there, you were on site, you're a subject matter expert. We need to bring you in. And now I meet with 3 or 4 retailers a day because it's virtual and I can pop in and out of any meeting and support our sales team, much more productively. So, another good example is Hershey has a facility, as many manufacturers do, that's really, for us, it's called the GCIC, Customer Insight Center. And it's an innovation lab that allows us to bring in, individuals in leadership roles across all of our retail partners, across all of our channels. And historically, we'd bring them into Hershey a day and a half, 2 days, 3 days. And we would really immerse them in the culture of Hershey, everything from product innovation to non-product innovation, and how do we partner, and what's our joint business plan going forward. And a couple of years ago, the company took a step back and said, hey, there's some retailers that just can't dedicate that time to come out, or they can't come out every year. Let's make this mobile. And we have this massive tractor trailer that's decked out in Hershey. It's really cool to see. And we take the innovation out of our retailers, and they come out for 2 hours instead of 2 days. And then the pandemic hit, right? And that truck was taken off the road, and there certainly were no retailers getting on a flight to come out to Hershey. And we said, the core of what we do is deploy these solutions. How do we meet the retailer where they are? And our teams quickly stood up what we call our Hershey Insights Network. And now it's like a live TV broadcasting. And we now broadcast live from the GCIC. So as a subject matter expert, I'll go in and I'll stand in our facility and I can still use our assets that are there and still have the same conversation. And it's actually been really productive. We get greater breadth of those leaders that are coming in. So typically in the past, we just talked about the importance of ops. We may not have had those operational leaders that could dedicate 2 to 3 days to come to Hershey, but now we can, and our conversations are more fruitful and it's really productive. So
that's pretty amazing. And
yeah,
and really, with retail experience in your title, it's all those things, really.
yes.
Even though a retailer may come to you, that it's almost like retailer experience on top of that.
Yes.
I think one of the things I really miss though about, and I hear work from home has been super productive for me and like everybody I work with. Our company, we thought, oh my God, what's going to happen here last year in March and April, and everything stayed the same. We were almost more productive. And like old school bosses will think, well, what are they doing around lunchtime? Is it an hour and 10 minutes? Is it an hour and a half lunch or whatever? But at the end of the day, I think it was an epiphany for everybody. Yeah. I heard a lot about I've been reading it as well about a 15-minute city. So that, you basically, and from a consumer perspective, you live in this like 15-minute city. I'm only going to this grocery store here. If I go to the grocery store, I'm only going here. Maybe I'm going to my school. So everything's sort of consolidated down into a much smaller space.
Yes.
And so do you get the feeling that retail is going to have to get inside everybody's 15-minute city somehow, other than the obvious, like e-com and live streaming and TikTok, and things like that? Are we going to have to get out there physically?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think it's kind of goes back to that value proposition of the shopper, right? We have to think so differently. Convenience has always been a top driver of value for shoppers on where they go to shop, how they shop, but I think it's becoming increasingly more important. I know me personally, I've shifted where I shopped a year ago isn't where I shop today. Fulfill my goods isn't, and retailers that weren't on my consideration list are now, where I shop, and I found a lot of loyalty there. So the battle for trips is definitely an interesting one to see right now. And there's a lot of channel blurring because of it, right? So one, even if you just think about the small box retailers, you see a lot more convenience and fuel retailers acting more like a QSR. So some notable innovation in that channel is the drive-through. A year or two ago, you didn't see any convenience retailers that had a drive-through, and now they do because of, like you said, how do we meet that shopper? How do we drive value for them? Before, they'll come and pump fuel, but maybe there's not a level of comfort going into the store, and now you can stay in your own car and order at the pump. And there's a lot of channel blurring. I think we're going to continue to see quite a bit of that as, a disruption or an accelerator, if you will.
There's something to smaller boxes, like getting out of a place, like you were saying, mobile trucks and things like that, really coming to the 15-minute city. Everybody's different 15-minute city. So tell me who you think is doing it right out there at this moment. And I mean, anyone, an airline, although I don't know that they'd be on anybody's list. Who's doing it right, do you think?
So this is an interesting one. And we're always looking at our external insight partners to see who's doing what well. How do we kind of rip and reuse what they've learned? I would say for us, again, at kind of a macro level, there's a few kind of key indicators that declared retailers that are doing it right. I think the first one is unlocking the real value framework, or the shift in the value framework, providing that optimal shopper guest experience, enhancing operational efficiencies, and then driving profitability. And I think that it's really limited on trying to achieve all three of those right now, because we know there's a lot of pressures operationally. There's a lot of pressures on the P&L right now as shoppers are shifting to this digital framework. And so operations is really driving a lot of the solutions that we're seeing out there. And how do you do that? Maintain profitability. A great example is the checkout, right? Those items that you find at the checkout, confection being one of them, but there's other categories, are really margin accretive to retailers. And as you don't have retailers going into the store now, going through the physical checkout, you're losing the conversion of some of those highly productive items.
Right.
And then I think, when we say who's doing it right now, those retailers that are getting out and testing and learning, those that are truly willing to innovate and test. I think there's so much disruption right now. And for much of it, we have to learn. And the only way to learn is to go test new formats. I think there's a lot of some of those accelerators, whether it's emerging technology, we're seeing this, obviously this acceleration of fulfillment centers, whether it's customer fulfillment center, micro fulfillment center. A lot of the models right now appear to be clunky because we don't know where there's going to be stickiness and where it's going to land. But we see an incredible amount of tests and pilots popping up very quickly. And I think those that are doing it right are those that are willing to learn and kind of develop the solutions as we go. And then there's also this element of kind of speed to market, or, we're living in this world of real-time retail. Everybody has access to incredible data and insight sources to really react to real-time demand, if you will. And I think those that are taking advantage of it and testing, those that are challenging themselves to think differently and meet the consumer demand are really winning within the space. So, we see a lot less new stores popping up. We're seeing a lot more remodels or shift in the box. You talked about the small box. Every large box retailer now has a small store format. There's, standalone experiences going into the stores. I think those that are learning are going to withstand the test of time, if you will, and kind of prove to win ultimately.
And then, the opposite is true too. Those that don't, that are, really struggling financially now, it's difficult from a fiduciary point of view to say, let's invest in this and let's go forward with this and let's test and learn as fast as we can, spend a bunch of money. And then your whole board looks at you like, are you crazy? We have 5 cents. So, we'll probably get to a point where there's going to be the haves and the have-nots in a pretty big way here pretty soon. Yeah.
And I think to add on to that too, there's a lot of partnerships popping up. So we talked a little bit about channel blurring. A great example is Kroger and Walgreens, right? So who would have thought that those two unlikely pairs would now have a partnership together? We're seeing a lot more of that. So I think people are identifying where their strengths are and where they can kind of outsource or bring in other thought leadership to create this unlock. I think we're going to continue to see the development of that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Even Sephora and Kohl's and both of those brands you would think independently would be pretty strong, but coming through the pandemic, not really, right? It was a little bit more difficult.
Absolutely.
One kind of out of the box question, but what's your take on social media and social platforms? I know you're using them, and just everybody almost has to at this point in time. But there's also this other element, of social that's not so great, and sometimes that comes back on brands because they say something wrong or something like that. Like, what's your take on social media?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because it's certainly been a topic of high interest, I would say, and you touched on it. But there's such a huge audience within that world. It's hard to avoid completely, right? But I would say, yes, Hershey, along with a lot of other brands, pulled back on advertising on some social platforms. And I think really the reason why is Hershey holds its digital partners, including social platforms, responsible for how they monitor divisive content. And they need to be held accountable, right? At different times, we've scaled back on investment with social platforms because we just weren't happy with their performance. And I know a lot of other brands did as well. But as we think about this retail world, some people call it kind of the 5th generation of retail, and it's this highly micro-personalized environment we're moving into. It's a great way to also talk to our shoppers and our consumers. So huge audience, can't obviously totally avoid it, but we have to hold them accountable.
I think it's a huge dilemma for retailers.
Yes.
And then how do you go about it? And then what kind of feedback do you get, and how much of that should you pay credence to, Yeah. Okay, so a couple of softball questions, if you will. What do you think is going to happen in 21 here?
Great question, right? If we had a crystal ball, I think what's going to happen is, I feel like a lot of retailers, manufacturers, it's kind of taking a step back and really evaluating what retailers are concerned about. And again, it comes back to driving operational efficiency, whether it's redeploying or minimizing labor, it's enhancing throughput and efficiency and inventory metrics. And I think that's really where everyone's laser focused right now is on kind of managing to the P&L and the profitability. And shoppers' expectations are changing, right? More than anything, shoppers are telling us they want choice in how they shop, choice in how they fulfill their goods, choice in how they check out, choice in assortment. Assortment online looks different than it does in store. And so I think, the way we consume media is changing with an expectation of personalization. The expectation to seamlessly integrate the digital and physical commerce has really become necessary to compete, if you will. So I think there's a lot of innovation in market. I think 2021 is trying to figure out, I think a lot of what's going to happen is where is there stickiness? Where has there been adoption, but where is it going to stick? We do a lot of work in this space. There's great examples, emerging technology, right? So there is probably 15, 20 emerging technologies out there that we could talk about. And they're really on this adoption scale, everything from a true frictionless, just walk out, unattended store to those retailers that are still trying to catch up with self-checkout. And I think figuring out where do we want to spend our time and our resources. And then I think the other one too is what's scalable? Where's their scalability? We see a lot of shiny penny of whether it's innovation, especially the large retailers that have the resources to go innovate. But where is there really scalability to efficiently deploy these solutions?
Is a chocolate truck scalable?
I'll tell you, I don't know if it's scalable, but it's productive. So it's fun to be on that journey for sure.
Okay, now super softball. You have 2 girls under 5, right? How's that going?
It's going as well as you think it could be going. It's exhausting, right? It's exhausting. This last year has been, my goodness, you take a step back, but I'll tell you, it's fun. It is incredibly fun. It puts a lot into perspective. There's been a real need to kind of reset on balance or, kind of work-life balance, I would say. I have a lot of friends or coworkers. I love to hear when they're like, I picked up a new skill during the pandemic. Like I learned to bake, or I made homemade pasta, or I've been sewing masks for those in my community in need. I'm just trying to survive. I'm really just trying to survive. I'm trying to create some balance in my life. It's been fun though, because as I mentioned, we're a dual income family. My husband and I are both really passionate about our careers. So there were plenty of weeks pre-pandemic where we were both gone. We had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and we had a nanny overnight with them. And there's a big feeling of guilt with that. And so pre-pandemic, every waking moment at home was spent trying to dote on our children. And during the pandemic, we're all home and it's a shift. And we said, we got to have time for ourselves, right? Whether it's exercising or reading or stepping away, there's so much passion with them, and they go to school every day and they absolutely love it, and they love to learn, and they teach me something new every day. But it's exhausting.
Sounds super positive for you then. I would say.
I'll tell you what, when we took a step back, we came out of it with kind of a new sense of balance, and it was very productive for our time for sure.
Okay, finally, what's all this about Peloton?
So rule number 1, if you own a Peloton, you always talk about your Peloton. So I'm glad you asked. Anybody who owns a Peloton.
Fight Club, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always wearing Peloton gear, and people are always like, oh, you have a Peloton. And I'm like, let me tell you about my Peloton. So we were actually in the minority that has had a Peloton pre-pandemic. So our Peloton's about 2.5 years old now. Again, pre-children, I had a passion for going to spin class. I was never really one on a road bike. If you look at my childhood videos growing up, I was, the 5-year-old on a bike looking backwards, running into a trash can. But I loved going to spin class. It was a great release of energy. And I had 2 children, and that came to a screeching halt. And so I always said I would never be able to work out from home. I can't self-motivate. I need to go to a gym. We bought a Peloton a couple years ago, and it's been incredible. It's a massive sense of community. I have girlfriends all over the country that I haven't seen in 2 years, but we ride every day together at 5:30.
Oh, wow.
The pandemic, I had a 90-day streak where I rode my bike every day for 90 days. It was my passion it was my me time. When I say my husband and I took a step back and kind of reevaluated, how do we allow ourselves to continue to have a little moment to grow. And that was my 1 hour a day that I could go do, my me time. And it's really stuck. It's an incredible piece of equipment. So I'm glad you asked.
Oh, yeah. So glass is half full, right?
Yeah. Yes, for sure. It's some days it's tough when the alarm goes off at 5 o'clock and you don't always want to get up, but I know that I will be a better human being, and I won't be as grumpy throughout the day, and I can overcome challenges better if I spend that hour on the Peloton.
Yeah, well, exercise is a big deal, especially now.
Absolutely.
Well, okay. Thank you, Gina. You've been very gracious. Much appreciated. Thanks for making WDcast better, and good luck. Good luck on that bike.
Yeah.
And you should get out and road bike. Come on, when the weather gets better, get out there. You won't run into it.
I know. We'll see. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate the conversation today, Lee.
So people, be sure and listen to WDcast as we grill extremely interesting guests like Gina, and in order to extract some more maybe ultra brilliance like we just got. So be sure and subscribe to this podcast, which is at wdpartners.com. You go to the podcast icon, which is at the bottom permanav of every page, talking to CPOs, entrepreneurs, people from CPG, retail experience people, marketers, all good learning. So thanks for listening. Stay out there, be safe. And remember, the first rule of leadership is it's always your fault. Take care. Talk to you soon.